So, hello everybody, and dare I say Happy New Year? Maybe not, because it's February now. Although in some places in Scotland, particularly way up high in the Shetland areas, which is just barely there as far as Scotland is concerned, they're still on the Julian calendar. So their behaviours are a little bit different than anybody else. They're not exactly playing catch up, but they get to have a couple of more New Years than we do. And personally, I kind of like New Year, so that's why I keep it going as long as possible. So it's just us three tonight. And basically, we are going to be discussing behaviours, building best behaviours, and has it got something to do with manners, the manner in which we behave? Or is there some conditioning elements in there? And as therapists and coaches, we probably will be seeing some behaviours and mannerisms and conditioning acted out in front of us more often than most people would think. So hello guys, Angela, Mary, what do we reckon? Building best behaviours, where does it start?
Well, I'm actually kind of curious because I would often work with clients who want to change behaviors. They want to change the way they're doing things. And I get confounded by this idea of it being better or best, because actually it's just different. So building behaviors or building patterns is something that we when things go wrong or when we're not happy, then we look at our behaviors and patterns and we say, oh, I might need to change them. But I sometimes wonder, do we put too much pressure on ourselves when we talk about them being best behaviors?
And I guess it goes back to childhood, doesn't it? That when we're told as children that we've got bad behavior or good behavior, surely it's just behavior, and it's society that determines what's good or bad, or the time of day that decides what's good or bad. So a bad behavior might be to sleep till lunchtime. It might be to not have breakfast. But is it not just something that's different?
Yeah, I think basically the conditional situation when it comes to society is that in order to work inside the reality of the society that we're in, particularly in the West, we truss our children up into tight things and say, sit down, shut up, be seen, not heard. Well, we used to. In my day, we used to.
Yeah, not quite as much now. There's still an element of that.
There's still an element of it. It's hanging on in there, you know. But it's one of those things also that there were a lot of people like Dr. Spock, not Mr. Spock, but Dr. Spock was a real person and a real psychologist, child psychologist person. He had some interesting ideas about behaviours and how to elicit them. And again, it's true that what we see as normal, natural, right, is definitely an opinion. It's not a fact. Because I, myself, having been brought up in the sit down, shut up and be good, don't get your shoes mucky or else situation, was always very interested in seeing how some kids could go around scuffing their shoes and getting their socks dirty without any recourse at all. And I realised only a few years ago, basically, that was more to do with the behavioural upbringing and conditioning of my parents and how they had been brought up and their fears and insecurities as to what would happen if you just allow a child to just go off and do stuff. Because not only do you have to buy them new shoes or wash their socks or change their socks because they don't get clean, they could hurt themselves. And then it's even worse. You could be taking time away from where you need to be to deal with all that carry on. So yeah, there's a whole lot of what's good for me. I want you to sit there, shut up, be quiet and stay there because I have things to do. I'm too busy to look after you or to engage with you.
Was there not also that part of keeping up with the Joneses and the fact that what was expected based on other people. So if you were misbehaving, how did that reflect on your parents by their neighbours? Were they then deemed to be
Bad parents.
or not as high in the social standings? And that then became part of the picture as well.
Yeah, but you even get that now when you have social strata situations when it comes to schemes, particularly in the Glasgow areas. And in when you get the poorer end of the scale when it comes to social situations. And we have schemes in this country, which is like estates, that's the word.
Or suburb.
An estate or somewhere. But even that, the schemes can be within an estate. Mm-hmm. And each scheme can be a different little fiefdom of its own. And it would depend on, you only play with the people in your scheme. So, it could, that already you're closing your world in. But there's a whole lot to do with looking good, looking like you are a certain way. You're clean, you're tidy, you're biddable, you're acceptable as a human being in the eyes of others. And the interesting thing,
it even comes down to things like language now, doesn't it? So when we're recording one of these, it's that concept of what constitutes the need to tick the button to say bad language, warning, and what's okay. And I guess that comes down to even different countries as to what the naughty list of words are, depending on whether it's on radio or TV, if it's before 9 o'clock, if it's after 9 o'clock. And all these different things as well. And that can be seen as a behaviour in the fact that if you are quite crass and you use a lot of sweary words, then you're not as educated. Now, that's not me saying that. That's just one of the assumptions or the assertions. That you're not as educated, or that you're an angry person, or whatever other societal challenge.
Well, it's actually been shown that a good sweary is a painkiller.
Yes.
But it's because because it's an energetic thing. You could actually, my auntie used to say, "Oh, for frying steak," and you knew exactly what she was saying, but she used frying steak instead. Didn't diminish the energy behind the words. It just was easier for the kids to hear. There was this kind of complicit idea that the kids were never going to say those words properly because they wouldn't know what they were if she said that. However, as you know, when you go to school, the first thing you do when you're a child and someone tells you not to do it,
you try it out.
You do it. You've got to push your boundaries. Got to push your envelope to see where it stops. And
not all children, but yeah.
Well, maybe not goody two shoes, but
but that is quite an interesting point, because when we're trying to build behaviors, Leslie, you and I are on the school, pushing the boundaries happens when the boundaries aren't clear, because you don't know where the boundary is. So, but if you have a very clear boundary, then it's clear. So there is no need to push it, because you know exactly where it is. So I think sometimes that the child who doesn't push boundaries actually knows exactly where the boundaries are for them in their environment.
I think possibly I was a little bit, I don't really want to say suicidal, but possibly reckless, in that I kind of knew that what I was pushing it, but I was willing to take the punishment that came with it. Although there were times when I would hide behind the coal bunker. A coal bunker is a receptacle, rather large, where people would put coal when we had coal fires. And they were usually outside the house in the garden or in a shed, actually inside part of the house. However, I used to wait there until my dad came home, because as far as I was concerned, if my dad came home and I went in with him, it wouldn't be so bad.
So you knew where the boundaries were as to what was safe to push?
To a certain extent, but there were occasions where you didn't know when you'd pushed it, because at one point you would be there doing whatever you're doing and it would be fine. But then, depending on the temperature of the room, when you walked in a late or something, it would depend on what you were going to get.
So
So
I guess that
yeah,
goes back to Mary's comment of you're not quite sure where the boundaries are if they're constantly changing. So if you knew that the boundary was here all the time, then you would maybe stop just before you got to it. But if your boundary's moving, then you never quite know when you've pushed it or not.
yeah, and you never quite knew. I think one of the funniest things that ever happened to me was I started smoking very early in life. There's a picture of me in a bathtub when I'm about 2 with a cigarette butt in my hand. Because basically that was funny in those days. Wouldn't be allowed now, but it was funny in those days to do that. However, having worked at the zoo when I was 11 and, you're with a bunch of men and it was the thing to start smoking. And you used to be able to buy them in singles. You used to be able to go into the shop and buy 2 single cigarettes and a book of paper matches. And so anyway, I got into the habit of doing that, and I would secrete the cigarettes. And I think it was the gold packet with the king size, Benson and Hedges king size it was. And
other brands are available. We're not plugging any.
Yes, well, yeah, I went away from the Embassy Regals because they were the sweeping up off the floors because there was chunks of wood in them. But oh yes, I'm quite a cigarette connoisseur, girls, definitely. And I even went into cigars at one point, and I just got this feeling. Now my mother had eyes like a hawk, absolute eyes like a hawk. And where we lived, there was like a big hill, and you could see from the hill, you could see the road that I would come from the zoo where I was working. And I kind of got the hackles on the back of my neck this day, so I decided to stash my cigarettes and my matches underneath one of the bushes before I went into the house. I went into the house and it was like something out of NCIS, up against the wall, spread eagle. She patted me down. Where are they? Where are they? And I was like, where what? Those cigarettes. I saw you, she says. And I'm like, where did you see me? I was up on top of the hill and I saw you. And I was like, oh, your eyesight, woman. And she'd seen me light up a cigarette while I was walking my bike around to come back home, and waited for me to come back. It was one of the funniest things ever. Not at the time, of course, but it's funny now.
But isn't it interesting?
Some person nicked my fags. Do you believe that?
I believe it. I well believe it. But isn't it interesting though that when we talk about behaviors and patterns of them, there's a lot of positive and negative feedback coming in there of how we, it's that punishment for that you're not wanted to do. And I have always felt that there is no point telling a child what you don't want them to do because they still don't know what to do. So, that when that child is running around driving mad, stop screaming. They can't. They're full of energy. So they need to be distracted to give them something else to do. So I've never understood if I wanted behaviors of telling them to stop something. Because to me, you say stop, then what? So I do find it interesting that when we look back on our own childhoods and, when I look back, I had very much that classic be seen and not heard, be seen and not heard. And, and you were to be good as gold and you were not to push boundaries under any circumstances. That was not a safe thing to do. So I learned incredibly tiny, do not push the boundaries. But I wonder then when it came to have my own kids, I absolutely pushed that. If I wanted different behavior for my kids, I want almost the opposite. And I was still strict about telling them, this is what I want. I want you to do this. This is how I want you to behave. And I do find it quite fascinating, the shift that has happened in the last 40 years.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a really good point about when I think about behavior and as a child, I think about, well, that's bad behavior, not necessarily that's good behavior. Possibly because I've seen, stop doing that, don't do that, don't do that. And it's usually because you don't want them to hurt themselves. So don't jump up and down on the stairs. Don't do that to your brother. not that I was bad to my brother, honest. But it was the whole don't do, as opposed to what about this? Do this instead. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Mary.
And also, though, we do have the situation where the universal mind doesn't actually listen to the word "don't." So all it hears is "do this," which is sometimes can be where the confusion comes in. But again, my mother would try and instill things into me, and I believe she thought that she was banging her head off a brick wall, because occasionally when I would go out to friends' houses or to my mother's friends' houses and have to stay the day or something like that because something was going on, and I'd come back and be brought in by the people that I'd been with all day, my mother would be kind of interrogating them. Was she all right? What did she do? Did she do this? She was fine. She was fine. She's a joy. She can come anytime. And my mother's jaw was just about hitting the floor.
So because she expected you to have this bad behaviour.
Yeah.
And I think that too becomes part of the challenge, is if we want to change behaviour, is what is the expectation we're setting to get started?
Yeah, and I think
So
the other thing that
are we expecting to fail? Are we expecting to be able to make a huge shift in behavior all of a sudden without any building of it up? So I think that, there's a lot of lessons we've learned when we look at children, but there's nuggets there that are just as relevant to us as adults.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best experiments is the instant gratification experiment, which we are actually all in at the moment and have been since we got mobile phones, to have everything at our fingertips. Oh, I want to see this, press this button now. Instead of, and binge watching like a whole series, you see one part on the television, hey, now you can see the whole thing, just go here. And so many people just sit and binge watch the whole series of something.
So it's interesting you say that, because I do have some friends who they like to binge watch their series, but if it's one of these ones that's released on a weekly basis, they will wait until the entire series is recorded to then watch it all together. So it's almost the reverse of it. They still want it all together, but they're willing to wait the 20 weeks to do the whole thing in one go.
That is an interesting conundrum on that one, but it is very much a case of controlling the issue as well, because there are a few children who will sit with the 2 marshmallows and, be told, if you don't eat those 2 marshmallows, you can have 3. I'm going to go outside of the room now, and when I come back, those 2 marshmallows, if they're there, it will be good and you will have 3. But up to a certain age, they cannot really control that impulse, because they know it's sweet and it's gorgeous and it's lovely. Or
they just don't understand what's been asked of them.
Well, they are of an age that they know that, if you don't eat those 2, you'll get 3 next time. That there will be another one added to it if you don't eat that. And you walk out the room, and of course there's a 2-way mirror thing, and they're like, or some of them will sit and look at it and just, the thing that they don't understand is time. Because time as a kid, it just is elastic.
You say that, but if someone said to you to sit down, to put the TV off, put your book down, put your phone down, and sit in silence for 10 minutes, after 2, you're sitting there going, surely it's 10 minutes by now.
No. Because I'm quite used to sitting down.
You do a lot of meditation, but there are those points, and I've done it myself, where I'm thinking, I'm supposed to sit here for 5 minutes. It feels like it must be 5 minutes, but and you'll check, and it's like 30 seconds have gone by.
But I
don't think that's just a child thing.
I think there are a lot of people who don't know how long a task takes. They don't know how long they spend doing it. So they say, oh, I'll just make that phone call, it'll be 5 minutes. They have absolutely no idea that in actual fact they're spending 20 minutes on the phone, and then they don't know how to get any work done. It's really common. Or I'm just going to spend 5 minutes on an email. It'll only take 5 minutes, and an hour later they're still composing the email. So our perception of the passage of time is very uncertain. In general, we're not good at knowing. As therapists, I suppose we end up getting more disciplined because we run sessions that we know have to be an hour, and so we keep it, and we get this sense of that's about 15 minutes in, I'm about a half an hour in. But I have had sessions where I've completely lost track of time.
So I tend to, but obviously with my sessions now on Zoom, I've got the timer set on Zoom that I can see at a glance how long my call's been on for.
Yeah.
And if when I'm doing face to face, I've actually got a very large clock that sits beside me with the time on it, so I can see really easily the passage of time, because it's so easy for it either to completely run away with you or to drag.
So I think that is part of the challenge when we're talking about building behaviors or buildings, is how much time we're investing. People are not good on the amount of time they're spending at anything. So when you start talking about changing behaviors or doing things better or different, the effort and that time piece takes a lot of attention. You really do have to work as well, what is achievable in that timeline, and can you time it for me, please, and be aware of it so that you can learn.
It's the Einstein thing as well, and it's very true. If you're enjoying something, it goes faster. If you're hating something, it goes slower, and it's all got to do with your focus. And I think that behaviorally, it's where our focus lies that either makes us build better practices and better behaviors, or improved behavior, shall we say. Because something about our behavior might not be working, might not be acceptable to others, like swearing perhaps, or smoking, or getting tight every now and again. And what happens when our inhibitions have actually gone because we're taking alcohol or we're taking other things. So in the 60s and possibly in the 90s, I've heard the 90s being described as, if you can remember the 90s, you weren't there. For us, it was the 60s. But yeah, I know. But basically, it's a case of...
I was playing too much of a two shoes, right?
Somehow I can't imagine you at a rave going off your nut on ecstasy, for sure. Look at the horror on her face.
The music was bad enough then. That's like...
Yeah, well, I think basically it was a case of, in the 60s particularly, they were looking for altered states. In the 90s, they were getting altered states without realizing what they were doing with it, and just thinking that, you know, being that way for that way's sake was enough. However, not realizing that there were other ways of doing it, because your brain provides that anyway. You know, it's kind of, and I think that's kind of the instant gratification as well. Take a tablet, you're there. You don't have to train your brain to do it. You don't have to go back into it. You're there. So, yeah.
I must admit, the idea of that does not appeal to me in the slightest. Which is possibly why I do remember the 90s.
I chose to forget the 90s on purpose because, you know, they just, oh no. Then I just worked through the 90s. I just put my head down and just worked. Didn't really pay attention to anything else. And I think that's a behavior that is a safeguard situation. I think a lot of people probably do that too. What they do is
So you mean building behaviors to protect yourself?
Yeah. Making sure that if I do this, and it's to a certain extent, it's possibly a control thing for people. Mm-hmm. If I do this and I do that, I will get that effect all the time because I'm doing the same thing to get that effect all the time. And it's only when somebody comes in and kind of changes something in there that they get really agitated and really upset, which is, for some people, a big problem. It is an issue. For others, they're like, I want to do it this way. But there are some people who cannot actually vocalize why they need to do it that way, why there's an absolute need for them to do it that way. And I think that generally it's a good idea if people realize that there may well be reasons behind it. They're not just being arses about it. There is actually an issue.
But for some, I guess it's a learned behavior. It's a habit. It's something that's formed. And this is how I was safe the last time I did that. So I'm going to do it the same way again just now. And I guess it's that way as well, that's how traditions are formed. And I'm protocols or routines are formed because you've done it once, it kind of worked, I'll do it again. And it's safe because the last time this happened, I was safe. So
that
let's
kind
do
of
it
brings
again
the
the
good
same
luck
way.
charm into play as well. And how
There
many
is a
times?
curiosity though,
Yeah.
that sometimes we can have a behavior and it's safe and it works and it's fine. And then over time, it becomes no longer, it doesn't serve us. So I think sometimes we can develop behaviors and patterns that we think are serving, like the idea of somebody working the long hours at work and in order to get places, and eventually they realize those long hours are actually destroying their health. So when they start changing,
but then it's a habit.
but then it's a habit.
I'm used to it.
Yeah. So I do wonder is if we're trying to build good behaviors or best behaviors, is there a role for introspection and saying, is this behavior serving me? And if we know it's serving us, then we might actually be even more inclined to do it. Because I was actually looking earlier today at the habits of highly effective people. And I was taken aback by the list that introspection was not in there.
Yeah, because they just do it. They don't think about it. They just do it.
Externally focused.
And it's actually somebody who was modeling that and looking at it going, how do you do that? How do successful people do that? How do they become successful and sustain it? So they started looking at the behavior models of those successful people and noticed a pattern.
Yeah.
And then correlated that pattern to their idea of success, which
but that introspection and that, okay, this has been working for 6 months, it's time to now reflect. Is that a behavior? Is that just another set of routine programs, procedures, principles, whatever you want to call them? Is it just another routine to follow? All right, it's been 6 months, I'm now going to reassess all of my behaviors and see which ones still serve me.
Well, it comes
some
down,
people do it and some people don't.
It comes right down to your thoughts and the way that you attach your experiential learning to thoughts and feelings and emotions. And it's one of those things that if we have something that is serving us, there's usually dopamine involved and serotonin. There's something about it that we find satisfying, even when it's not good for us. There's something about it that we find satisfying, which is why we keep doing it. And which is why
we were proven right. It was exactly as expected. So there's that sense of achievement's not the right word, but there's that sense of satisfaction that it went the way I expected it to. So that's fine.
Bugness, maybe. we can feel really smug with ourselves. Well, yeah, that worked. Of course that worked. I'm going to do that again because I liked exactly. Give myself a pat on the back for that one, because it was, yeah, that worked. I enjoyed that feeling. And it was something that we've spoken about before, is this build up when we go to see speakers like Robbins or Jack Black or anybody like that, who's actually, or even Billy Connolly, who can be quite a motivational person in a funny way. But it's one of those things that when we're going, we're building up the anticipation because we have an expectation that we're going to be up. We're going to be motivated. We're going to be, and we're already, these chemicals, these biochemical markers are already coming through and washing our brains out. And then we're in there and we're waiting. And suddenly there's this person who's going to make everything. They've got it. They've made it right. They've done something. There's this magical little bean somewhere and they sold the cow for it. And they've got this thing going on. And we're wrapped up and we go with that flow. And then we come away from that place and we go back and we enter our own front door and we're sitting there going, oh, this is my life. And sometimes that's why it doesn't work. Because everything that goes up here balances back down again, particularly when it comes to our nice hormone levels and biochemical markers.
So there's also that chance that someone's come back home with learnings from that experience and they have changed their behaviours and things do seem different and there's a new outlook on life.
But they can't. They have changed their intention about their behaviours, but the behaviours themselves need time to be put in place. So it isn't instant. The
No,
behaviors
but it
the
could
change
be
in
that
behavior isn't instant.
start has happened because they've intentionally made the change or made the conscious decision to start the change.
Yeah.
Whereas others have come home thinking, well, I'm fixed now and it's just going to be fine. And those, I think, are the ones, Leslie, that you're meaning that are coming back, well, oh, this.
Yeah, that was supposed to be fixed. That was supposed to be me. I'm supposed to be just successful now. But it's also got to do with
without realising that there's work to be done.
to do, because they don't tell you you're going to have to work at this. They don't tell you that behavioural change takes time, because habits are ingrained patterns. They are strategies that are absolutely set until you derail them and you give them something else instead. There has to be an exchange of values. And there's the ecological marker. If you go to something like this and then you come back and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and your granny's sitting there going, oh, aye, and who's that going to happen for you then? What makes you think you're going to be able to do that? But we already carry that voice too.
Some of us do. So,
yes,
but
you don't. We know that you don't.
There's also that part that I'm sure I read somewhere about. I'm just amused at the fact that it's episode 21, that apparently it takes 21 days for a habit to form or to change a habit. So there could be something there as well in the fact that it's needing to know that it's going to take a bit of time and it's not just going to be instantaneous, that you do have to work on something and it takes time for something to become a habit.
Yeah, there's a kind of expectation in that 21, because the other day I heard that it had been upped to 6 weeks. So the meaning of life, 42.
You never know. Could be somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about it again on episode 42 if we're still here doing that.
But I mean, it's one of those things that in some cases, particularly with hypnosis, it will happen like that, unless they unpick it. But only because you've hit it right and you've got the actual communication and cooperation of the unconscious mind, of that person's absolute inner self, saying, yeah, I know, I realise this needs to change now, and I'm happy for you to change it. And then maybe it'll turn around and say, but I'm not happy for you to change it completely right now. I'm happy to take it to level 5 instead of level 7, or level 7 instead of level 9. And then we'll look and see how we're going from there and maybe come back to it to decrease it further.
But it is about that consciously making the choice that change is what you want to happen. So I know I talk with a lot of my clients, I'm not here to change your life. I'm not here to change you. I'm here to facilitate you making those changes.
Oh yeah, we're just wee guides. We're just here with like the airplane coming in with the 2 table tennis bats.
No, I prefer the sidekick. I'm quite happy to be your sidekick.
Oh no, okay.
So
okay.
I'll
you just like capes.
Don't need to have a cape. I don't have one today. I don't need to have a cape. I like that idea of the sidekick, of the little voice that's there to say, I'm still here if you need me. And maybe you want to look at that path instead of just constantly going straight. You maybe want to take a wee detour here and have an investigation. But yeah, I think it is. It is the facilitation of it, and I know I say that with my clients. I'm sure both of you do similar, in the fact that I'm not going to fix your life, because you're not broken. Something in your life you feel the need to change. Fantastic. I'm here to help you on that journey of changing something, but you're the one that's got to do the work. And if you want to make it a behavior because you've changed something and created a habit or created a new behavior, it's you that's done that work, and I'm just here hand-holding.
I did come across an interesting piece, though, that, you know, where you're doing the hand-holding, that sometimes that I would always be inclined to say, you know, start with the end in mind. What do you want it to look? Where is the end point? I was reading earlier today. Somebody said, well, look at what failure might look like. You know, don't be putting too many expectations on yourself straight off that you'll get all the changes in straight away. And it didn't sit right with me. I could understand why it was there, but I thought, no, we're not going to do that. I think it comes back a little bit from this positive negative bit. Do you reinforce the good stuff and get more of it, or do you punish what you don't want so that you get less of it?
Kind
But
of
is there
middle road
perhaps-
She's
there.
embedded in that a little bit.
I wonder if there's more just a piece that it's an awareness. So what is the worst case scenario, so that I know what it is I'm not really wanting to go towards. So when I get to that crossroads in the road, that's the stuff I don't want, that's the stuff I do want, I can now recognise it. So there could, to me, perhaps be some merit in understanding, but then not to allow that to then become the be all and end all.
Because there's always choice.
Hmm.
It's like, one of my favourite things is the quote in Alice in Wonderland, where Alice is standing there looking at the two paths, and the Cheshire Cat, sorry, Angela, the Cheshire Cat is up there just looking at her and grinning away, and she says to him, which way should I go? Where ought I go? And he looks and says, well, where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? She said, I don't know. He says, then it doesn't matter which road you pick. You'll get somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always another road. There's always a little tributary. There's always a choice that will take you in a different direction. And I think that a lot of the times we have this behavioral conditioning that once you've picked one thing, you can only stay with that one thing. You have to stay in this job for the rest of your life, which is totally out of date and really just, that's just ridiculous. Now, we don't have that kind of, I don't even want to say security. I kind of want to say enslavement, but that's not the right word either. But you know what I mean? This kind of fixed idea that you're going to be this one thing for the rest of your life. And if you're not that thing, then there's nothing else that you can do.
It's back to that kind of old phrase, isn't it? You've made your bed, now you need to lie in it. Well, no, you don't. You can go and get a new mattress. You can go and change the bed sheets. You can put it in a different room. It doesn't have to be fixed. Things don't tend to be permanent.
Well, no. Every Buddhist can tell you that.
As long as we're open to the opportunities and the possibilities, that choices don't have to be permanent. You can usually get out of pretty much anything. Usually. When it comes to tattoos, avoid the colour green, because apparently that you can't remove. But the rest of it you can.
No idea.
Whichever it doesn't matter whether you're losing it or not, it hurts to. So if you're going to get a tattoo, make sure you really want it in the first place, because that's something that's never really going to go away. It's always there under your skin. So yeah, it is one of those things that I don't know about you guys, but I get a few people coming in and they're not really sure what it is that they want to talk about. But what they tell me about is behaviours and things that they're doing in life. And the way that they're telling me about it, the words that they're using, gives me more of a clue about the emotion behind it and about the triggers. So I have to listen properly to understand where the sore point is. My husband is very surprised that I can do this without actually taking my finger, poking it in there, kind of, because he says to me, see with your eyes, not with your fingers, because occasionally when he gets a scale for something like that, and I'll just say, give it here and I'll have a look.
I was going to say, you do strike me as the person who likes to go poking and digging into the sore bits.
Well, I was a vet nurse, a surgical vet nurse. I mean, come on, I used to have my hands
But I think it is
firmly on the sore bits.
Firmly on the sore bits.
But I do think it's important. That whole idea is people find it easier to talk about behaviors because they're not as loaded as emotions. We have a tendency to, some emotions are perceived as positive and some are perceived as negative, which they're not. They're just emotions, but we've labeled them. So when we talk about the behaviors, that's actually an easier conversation because it's not as
emotive.
value ridden. Yeah.
I mean, it's true when we're looking at something and we say it's an anger situation and there's a behavior that happens, and you used to hear a lot of people saying, well, you still hear a lot of people saying, I just saw red. And you know that that's them feeling anger, they're feeling rage, they're enraged. But somewhere along the line, when that situation took place, deep in part of their brain, the little brain guy up there was going, hang on a minute, file. This has happened before. I know, hang on. Oh, there it is. Boom, we're enraged.
But usually when it's rage, there's something else behind it.
Of course there is. And usually it's got to do with fear of some kind.
Yeah, fear, lack of understanding.
Security. I don't want to change because change is not good.
But there's also that point of, is rage actually a negative, or is
not
there
all the time.
positive? Exactly.
Not all the time.
So back to Mary's comment about the emotions being negative or positive, we're the ones that put meaning to it.
Yeah, but
we're
also,
the ones that add the filter.
Also, we're the ones who do not elicit or explore those emotions, those behaviors in the right space and time. Which is like, if you're getting upset.
But what is the right space and time?
I'm just going there. Give me a minute. Just wait. So you get in there, you're having an argument with your boss, your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever, and they're really pushing your buttons, but you can't say anything because you know you're just going to just blow your top. And then you go out and you stomp out and you go into the car and you get in and drive. And that's
maybe not the safest option either.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
That
is not the best place to explore that emotion, because that is going to end up with somebody else who's maybe not paying attention or having a bad day themselves, does something that you feel is absolutely stupid, and suddenly the pressure cooker has gone, the lid is off, and there is just a mess everywhere. And do you feel better for it afterwards? No.
Or it's internalized and it's self-sabotaging on your own personal safety and well-being.
Yeah, we have emotions, and we have each one of them elicits a different biochemical marker in the body. And we have that there because it's a case of we're constantly balancing the chemicals in our bodies, the hormone levels, the biochemical markers, the serotonin, the dopamine, the oxytocin, all that stuff. Thankfully, we don't have to think about it.
I do think it's interesting though, because sometimes I think when we're talking about changing and building best behaviors, sometimes it seems to be quite easy to attach emotion to the behaviors and just sort of make you feel really good and you feel really wonderful about yourself and it boosts your self-esteem. They're easy, then the behaviors are easy, but not all good behaviors, tidying we mightn't have the same level of emotion if we have a pile of clutter sitting in the corner, but that clutter might serve us well for something else, So I'm wondering, sometimes is that linking of behaviors and emotions, maybe we would benefit our clients more if we were actually way more explicit about it and actually explored the emotions that they want from these supposedly best behaviors.
I must admit, there are occasions when I do poke the bear.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, I know, it's surprising, isn't it? And you guys, you don't know me that well, really. So why would you know that? But yeah, it's a case of one of the best things for me is confrontational therapy, because it surprises and it shocks, and it will actually bring out what needs to be brought out, because they'll just come as a reaction, not.
So I don't agree that works all the time.
Well, not all the time. Don't do it all the time.
No, but I'm saying I think there are certain people that a confrontation is the last thing that would ever be beneficial for them, because their reaction is to go and hide. It's the head in the sand thing. So if someone comes at them in a confrontational way, they're just going to turn around, crawl into a ball, and not respond. So
when it comes to confrontation, I don't mean going nose to nose and toe to toe with them. I mean asking questions
for
that
some,
are
it's any
particularly
level of confrontation can be confronting, and it will be that kind of shut off safety valve. I'm just going to freeze.
Yeah, you do have to pick your battles in that department. You have to know what's going on. Again, you have to look at the body language and listen to what they're saying.
I was going to say, I must admit, I think the only person I've used confrontational techniques on is yourself, Leslie. I don't think I've used it with any other clients.
Well, well, you know fine well that my behavioural conditioning is that I will swallow a lot before it comes out. Because I was sit down, shut up, don't move, or else. So, occasionally it's when something has to come out, it's usually better for some people, like myself, to be not coddled.
So to be confronting, yeah.
To be confronted, yeah. Because if you don't leave me anywhere to go, I won't be able to slip around the corner and ignore the behaviour.
Mm.
And actually, if I remember correctly, I did ask you to do that.
Yes, which is why it's the only reason I did it.
I give you full permission.
It's not my comfort zone to go do that.
So in other words, psychologically safe space.
Yes. I knew exactly what was going on. And I don't
know if it was psychological safe space for me to go into that confrontational mode, but I got there.
Well, we were on Zoom, so it wasn't that much, If we'd been in the same room, I might have understood how uncomfortable you would be, but
Yeah. I think I'm not comfortable pushing those buttons unless I've been given explicit permission to do so. And as exactly as Mary said, it is at psychological safe space.
Yeah.
And the fact that if we don't feel safe as therapists, we can't expect our clients to feel safe with us. But it's also about putting that piece across to the clients in the way that we behave, that you are safe in our company. You're safe in a room with us on Zoom, in the most part these days.
Yeah. I mean, I do have the introduction where I will say, if I think it's going to be appropriate, I may say something to you that will make you feel angry at me. And I want you to feel totally okay to express yourself verbally that way. Just verbally, though. Because the other way might pose a problem.
Yeah, it's quite expensive to replace webcams regularly, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was once advised by a therapist to go and find a punch bag and punch it.
Oh yeah, I used to have a boyfriend who used to
that
go out
I
and
had
take
a
the
punch
dustbin.
bag. Yeah, I had a punch bag. I punched it. The boundary for when I was to stop punching wasn't explicitly set. I had a sore arm afterwards, a very sore arm and shoulder by the time I'd finished.
That's why you need to stretch first, right? I know I'm going to be angry in 2 minutes. Let me do some stretches first, and then I'll go and take my anger out of the punching bag.
I don't think they do it now, but in the 80s, the Japanese daimos, like Toshiba and all these big Japanese companies, used to have basements where they would have these mannequin type rubberized roboty things with the managers' faces on them, so that the
how
the
is
workers,
that a healthy option?
Well, the workers used to go down and knock 7 bells out of them in their lunch break or something, just to get their rage out. Because their behavioural pattern is so tightly wound, and their hierarchy, you cannot even raise your eyes to someone who is above you. You have to always keep your head down. And, that was their way of saying, do you know what, on you go. But the other way they did it as well was they would go out a lot and get really, really ratted.
That's different to lots of places in the UK. How?
Well, the women aren't allowed to go.
Okay.
That is one of the reasons that I didn't go to Tokyo at one point. I was invited, and I said to the chat, I said, no, I can't come to Tokyo because I don't like the way you treat women. Oh, don't worry about it, Leslie. We'll treat you like a man. Okay.
Because that's what you wanted to hear, right?
Well, if it was going to let me take some sake, then I don't care. No, it's true. There's a lot that you can learn from not just the way that people speak to you, but the way that they speak to each other, even in a different language. And it's all got to do with body language. We're always throwing out our ideas of what is okay, what's not okay, what we're hiding, what we're not hiding, depending on, you know, the indications that we're showing. It
Which
doesn't
does
even have.
bring up
No, go on.
an interesting point about diversity, because nowadays we have way more intermingling of cultures and backgrounds and ethnicities all over the place, both, you know, in every country in the world, because there's so much more mobility about people. The challenges on behavior are different within the workplace, because different you've more to get that diversity understood and included, but yet maybe the host culture been different. It gets more complex.
It does, and you know, it's very kind of facile to say that we're all the same. Physiologically, anatomically, not even then, we're not. But at the same time, the idea is that we're all human. We're all animals.
But what's expected of behaviour culturally and gender-wise and age-wise and everything else, it's very nuanced. And yet, yes, in the workplace, I did work somewhere where we started outsourcing a number of functions offshore, and they actually brought in a team of people to teach us how to communicate with the people from this other country. And it was fascinating. I think I kind of threw a spanner in the works because I'm half and half for that particular country, and so I understood a lot of the cultural aspects, and so I wasn't responding the way the instructor was expecting. But it was that point that we're aware that we're bringing people from a different culture to work on these roles, and therefore we need to make sure that our staff in both countries understand how to communicate with each other, because it is a different way of processing, and what one person might find rude, the other person might find overstepping the mark, and vice versa. So it's about finding that common ground and understanding to allow you to not upset each other and be the best that you can be when you work with people across cultures.
Yeah, one of my bosses said to me at one point, "You're so rude. Why are you so rude?" I just looked at him and said, "What do you mean I'm rude? Go away. I'm busy." And then his son had an accident and ended up in a hospital, and he came in the next morning to me and he said, "I saw you last night." And I was like, I wasn't anywhere last night. How could you see me? He said, "I get it now. It's a cultural thing." I'm sorry, what? He said, "There was a staff nurse at the hospital and she came from Corbett, and I seem to remember that's very near to where you came from." And I was like, "Yeah." He said, "It was you." I get it now completely.
I'm not that far from Corbett. I don't think I act like that.
Yeah, but you're not a vet nurse. You're not.
In all fairness, it is a different council area.
Exactly. Goodness sake, though.
So I don't think there can ever be one best behavior.
I think it's basically what everybody is able to accept, and to understand the motivation behind it.
But I think it's also that with what's best behavior for me today might not be my best behavior tomorrow, because things are constantly changing, they're constantly evolving, and we're never the same person again. And
they're doing it faster now. It's happening faster now.
All right, so how I am right now is not going to be the same as I am in 2 hours from now.
No, quite possibly. It depends on how much I can piss you off in the meantime.
No, that's not a challenge, Leslie. Don't go there.
See, did it.
Won't be involved.
It's
I will
that,
extricate myself.
it's the Hulk comment. You don't want to see me angry. It's been a long time. Let's not go there.
Oh God, yeah. It's what
I cannot be held responsible for my behaviour if you make me lose my temper.
I could say the same. Couldn't everybody though?
Yours goes more often than mine does.
Not full.
No, not
Caldera.
full Hulk. No.
Not full Hulk. No. Because I choose to express it and let it out.
I do remember standing at the side of a rugby pitch with underage rugby, and a comment was made about, oh, the mist. It's just the red mist descended, as if that somehow justified.
That's okay then,
one
right?
youngster taking a clatter off another. That was totally a foul play. The red mist descended somehow was to explain everything.
Yeah, but
and
this is it.
justify it.
It's been an excuse for a long time, because at one point someone got away with it in court. And then it became this thing whereby if you've got a red mist, you are not responsible for your actions. Actually, you are responsible for your actions up to the point of that. So you can choose to allow the red mist to come along, or you can take yourself away from the situation and stop. And not bloody up the other person. Or worse.
And in these days of Zoom, it's the red button.
Leave.
I'm just going to walk away right now.
Just, switch
Your
off.
mic is on. Your mic. You're on mute. You're on mute.
And in some cases, quite deliberately.
I'm going to look out for that one.
These days I'm on mute because I've got man flu and I keep coughing. But that's another story.
So basically what we're saying is that behavioural conditioning has got more to do with behaviours and not a lot to do with manners, because manners are taught. But then again, so is behaviour. We get to know how to behave by mimicking other people. So if we are not in the space where someone has the enough emotional intelligence to be able to handle certain situations without putting their fist through a wall or hitting somebody else, then a child is quite possibly going to grow up thinking that's the way that is handled, unless they get to know better or differently. So I think we've kind of scratched the surface of behavioural and building better practices, because the only way to build better practices is, as Mary said, be a little bit introspective and look at your behaviour and see how it's serving you or not. And then if you find that it's not serving you, we're here when you're ready. So have a good evening or a good day or a good morning or whatever time space that you're in, and be kind to yourself as well as other people, because that gets you a lot further on in life. Bye for now.
Bye for now.